Hello, everyone, and welcome to Surrogacy Australia's webinar. I'm your host, Anna Mackay, and my co-host tonight is James. James and his husband, JimBob from Brisbane, became dads to their son, Rupert, in March 2023. Their surrogate, Jemma, from North Queensland, was previously a stranger whom they met at a Growing Families conference in June 2021. Jemma's waters broke early at 30 weeks, resulting in quick action from all families. Jemma managed to stay pregnant for a little bit longer and birthed Rupert at 32 weeks via an emergency C-section, but he has been a strong and healthy bubba since. Their egg donor, Zoe, is James's sister, and she offered to be their donor back when they were teenagers. Welcome, James. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Anna. Glad to be here.
Lovely to have you here. We've got some wonderful photos here of James's journey, so we're going to work our way through those. So perhaps we'll just start with this first photo, James. Tell us who's in it.
Sure. So it's myself, my husband, my sister Zoe, and our beautiful surrogate Jemma. Um, this is actually when we were down at the Gold Coast. I think we found a random cafe that we had done a scan at. Um, yeah, it was part of the ongoing activities we kind of had. There was a lot of them. It was good.
And I really like the fact that your surrogate Jemma met your egg donor Zoe. Now, I guess Zoe's family, but clearly everybody knowing each other and not doing this in isolation was important to your team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think look, look, it's a weird place to start. So I'm not exactly sure where to sort of begin the journey. I think that
We can go
uh
back. Do you want to go back to the beginning then?
no, no. We'll keep going. No, look, I think it's the rituals that we kind of went through as a team. This is probably a representative. The photo is an occasion of a scan, but it was probably indicative of a number of activities that you do together, which I think probably lends itself to sort of cementing how important it is because you spend so much time together. It's not a Gemma was up in North Queensland, but she would come down for scans. We would go up there and you become fast friends, but you get fast friends in an incredibly intimate arrangement, in incredibly intimate and formal and personal and emotional kind of sort of moments, and sort of it is it's definitely a roller coaster of kind of
Mm.
extreme highs and extreme frustrations, and but you do it together,
Mm.
which is the important part.
Mm. It's a journey like no other, hey? Yeah.
That yeah, that's understatement. Yes.
It is, right? Yes. And particularly for two men that, then having an egg donor in your life, mind you, that's your sister, but then a woman and a surrogate, but it's not just a surrogate, is it? It's her family and everybody that comes along for the ride. And
Yeah.
all these things you've learned about women's bodies.
Oh, women. I don't know about women. Oh my God. If there's a superior being, it's a woman, and you learn that as a gay man who has not much knowledge of women. But I was really fortunate. Obviously, I had my sister who I don't even remember. We were talking about it. I think it was about 16, and I think she mentioned that this is sort of when I sort of came out, and part of the reality of that is you're probably never going to have a family again. It's it's a like I said, it's part of a rich tapestry of kind of history. But Zoe and I sort of had discussions early on, and it was never really there was never really a point where she kind of offered. We got to a point where we kind of went, it's logically now's the time to start to do the stuff. And then all of a sudden, we need another team member, uh, and sort of as part of the ritual of going through the motions of uploading Facebook statuses and joining groups and putting yourself out there. We were extremely fortunate to have met Jemma in a conference scenario where we actually met her as an egg donor. So we were probably far more, and certainly my husband, it will tell you, he's far more relaxed talking to Jemma because you kind of got to put your best foot forward. I think talking briefly on the social media post stuff, we're relatively private people. We don't post a lot of things on social media, so the alien kind of position you have to be put in to put yourself into this group of strangers who you know nothing about, they know nothing about you. You've got, X number of lines of text in order to post yourself, your life, and how, I guess, I mean, you're a stable relationship. You're financially stable. You got reasonably, all of this stuff you have to put in a Facebook post, which if that's not part of your kind of makeup, it's extremely intimidating, and that's step one um, of that sort of thing. So you kind of, like I said, the emotional kind of connection with things. So fortunately, we met Jemma at a conference, and we didn't have to continue on the social kind of media bandwagon. But unfortunately, people sort of say that's the only way you can kind of put yourself out there. And you quite rightly put out there that if you don't,
Be active.
if you're not active, you don't comment on things. I don't comment on people's posts. I probably should, but I don't. And so you're sort of putting a version of yourself out there that isn't really you, which is a very uncomfortable position to be in. So we were extremely lucky that we met, like I said, Jemma in a conference scenario, and she was obviously a previous egg donor. So we had a conversation, there was no sort of preconceived kind of, we were putting ourselves best foot forward. We kind of had a bit of a breath of fresh air, because every kind of lady we encountered at this conference could possibly be our surrogates, and maybe we should, put our best foot forward. So it was a really fortuitous that our team sort of got together the way that they did.
And just to clarify for listeners, so Jemma was presenting at that conference, or one of the speakers, as one of the egg donors, because she's donated many times. She hadn't necessarily been considering being a surrogate, but when she met the two of you, as people can hear if they listen to her podcast episode, it was it's a bit like falling in love, really. And it's just this click that you have with these two people and new friends, and then it grew from there. Do you happen to remember how long it had been from when you first decided as a couple, okay, we're really going to start investigating surrogacy, to that conference? Was it sort of 6 months? Or?
Yeah, no. So we thought we had to have all the egg donation, the egg stuff and the embryos sorted first. So I think we started in about 2020, in the sort of midst of COVID. We kind of, Queensland was fed fairly well during COVID, unfortunately, to our, better than some of our southern cousins. But we still were fortunate enough to still be able to meet with a fertility specialist, and we created embryos back in 2020, which is where we first encountered sort of the counselling, because you obviously have to go through counselling to create embryos before you. So the system, if you call it the system, that was the first entry into the system where we actively took steps, was 2020. And we did it because it was more of a, like I said, it was the right time. It was the right time for Zoe. It was, we got married in 2020, and we kind of figured that, we didn't want to wait around with that sort of stuff, and that was kind of squared away. So we took the opportunity to do that. Before we sort of entered the surrogacy kind of chapter, we actually reached out to SASS. So we actually, we met you, Anna, through SASS, and probably one of the most valuable parts of that was the mentoring piece. You and I have talked about that, but the mentoring piece with Dwayne, that you put me in contact with, and we sat down and had a coffee. We literally had a coffee at the Balimba cafe, whatever it was, and it was probably the thing that sort of went, like, we've been entertaining this idea of starting a family, and we obviously we were somewhat invested, because obviously embryo creation is not a cheap or an easy exercise. So we sort of committed to that point, but it wasn't until we sort of had a coffee that we went, actually, this is something that could probably happen. And then it was from that point onwards, it was 3 years till Rupert was born in his preemie stage.
Yes. And yes, as you say, it's that when you meet somebody, either a mentor or other people who have done this journey before you, that were you a few years beforehand, it's like, and they've become a parent, and this really can be done in Australia. It helps to make it real, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And like it changed sort of our approach to it rather than it being a sort of a passive approach. We sort of decided to then take an active approach. Dwayne gave us some fantastic advice on the Facebook groups and how to engineer with them, but that was kind of the first active step we took towards it, and then obviously the conference from there. So,
Yeah.
um,
Mm. So then let's sort of work through the timeline. So then you met Jemma, and then the chat started, and then, leading at some point to the embryo transfer and getting pregnant. Anything that you could summarize for us in that surrogate dating or the counselling and legals that springs to mind?
oh, look, yeah, look, it was a lot. It was like I said, we talked earlier about building a house. It's far more than that, especially, I mean, if you're also working full time. So logistically, it is it was quite a significant undertaking. Which I mean,
Did you, sorry, did you have date nights or that sort of stuff to try and catch up virtually due to the distance, or it was messenger chats, or how did it go?
we had a messenger group, which was we sort of I don't know, flirted with each other, I suppose. Like it was kind of like you sort of the kind of it's such a bizarre thing to try and articulate to someone, but you sort of we're happily married people, but all of a sudden we're flirting with this beautiful woman, try like. Uh, and hopefully, so it was yeah, look, we obviously we had a couple of we had a couple of catch ups in person, so we drove up there, sort of we we really got along really well. Like I think the first night she sort of, sorry, this is probably the wrong tone to take, but she chased us and got our number, which we just could not. We got home and we were kind of on floating, and so you can't help but then kind of give. Give little selfies and this is what we're doing and just to kind of keep the interaction going. So yeah, there was plenty of conversation. I think I've never texted someone in my life as much as I've texted Gemma during that stage, but it was good to kind of keep in touch. And then we sort of had a couple of trips up to Gladstone. We went up to Tunham Sands. I'd never been up to Tunham Sands. By the way, beautiful. And
Mhm.
so what a spot to sort of spend some time and get to know someone. So it was nice. She came down here. She's got heaps of family down here. So we took opportunity to sort of catch up before I think Gemma sort of formally offered, and we kind of knew it was coming, but it was also like yeah, it was a stage that we sort of yeah, an indescribable kind of like, oh my God, this could possibly happen, So,
And that, for those who are new listening, that tends to be the way it goes, doesn't it? You date with the intention that you're probably going to make a team, but it's often you wait until the surrogate's ready, and then they usually make an offer.
yeah, and look, and Gemma knows we had actually spoken to a couple of ladies through the social media channel, and we sort of caught up with some people, and look, we maybe it was the distance, maybe it was the thing, and we genuinely had this kind of like a very strong connection. Like her husband plays rugby, we play rugby union. Like we just sort of met, kicked off as friends, and so it was uh but yeah, you kind of dating, like it is kind of that, and it's probably the most confronting term for it because it sort of um I don't know,
You're
it's the closest thing, but it's really not the same thing.
you're dating a woman and her husband too.
Absolutely. Oh, and Will. Oh, brother from another mother. I like, and this is the thing. Like, so we were extremely fortunate that we just got along so well. We all had really common interests. We kind of had, common values, and I think like the value stuff was huge. We obviously went through the process and had all the counselling. We literally threw everything we possibly could at it. If there was an option to do, well, I mean, in Queensland, you kind of have to do get group counselling. You have to do sort of certain counselling stages, but we went sort of above and beyond all that. Like so, I saw we all saw counsellors sort of by ourselves, and throughout this process, you kind of learn a bit about yourself, which isn't always things that you really want to learn. Like it turns out I'm not very self-aware. So,
Right.
when you're sort of being externally focused on the situation and the tasks and the things that need to happen, and you're very focused on making sure that everyone is happy, and because they're doing this favor for us, and then you sort of have a realization that you yourself are kind of not really thinking about how you're feeling, how you're kind of, and that's kind of confronting, and things sort of you know turn up. I don't really know how to end that part. You
Yeah.
learn a lot about yourself, and you,
Mhm.
you you learn you obviously build a lot of resilience. You also build a bit of a picture of how you interact. I've been told in the past that I'm a bit of a blunt object at times, um,
Right.
and very early in the piece, Gemma and I kind of had a bit of a disagreement, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened to us, because I mean, my job, my career, my everything kind of lends itself to sort of just bulldozing through whatever needs to happen, and that's not the arrangement, and nothing really fits. Like, you can't really think of it like a job or a career. It's not. The closest thing is obviously family, and we absolutely consider ourselves family, but that's a really, really difficult concept to consider when you've met someone 6 months ago or 4 months ago, like, and all of a sudden this person means the world to you, and you're so focused on making sure everything's good.
Get it
You sort
right.
of, yeah, like, yeah, and there isn't really a rule book. You sort of, like I said, you follow the basis, and you hope that all the players in the team are kind of doing their job. We had situations where we Gemma being somewhere removed up in Gladstone, and us being down here, we couldn't kind of, and I know this is the wrong term, but we couldn't kind of eyeball her to make sure that she's doing okay. So we really relied upon Will, her husband, to kind of give us a heads up, and then we could kind of do something, send her something to let her know we're thinking of her. But we couldn't have done that if we didn't have a really cohesive kind of team where we had really open lines of communication. And like I said, I mean, the I don't even remember what the disagreement was, but like up front, when we kind of had a little bit of I came in a bit firm with something, and it was not the space or the way that it needed to be done, and it was good because it gave us an opportunity to go, well, how do we communicate? How do we make sure? Because we all want this to work, and how, like, So anyway, with the journey of sort of self discovery is not absent from this process.
I like that. The journey's, yeah, so true, right? You learn so much about yourself and your own partnership through this. Yeah, it's fascinating. There's so many interesting points that you're saying there. I'm liking that.
I'm ranting is what I'm doing, but
No, no,
thank you for entertaining it. Yeah,
no, trust me, like I've done over 100 of these, and I find it really fascinating hearing the differences in each team, but there's sometimes the similarities. But what was I going to say? I think it's often conflict that helps teams. The teams that have no conflict, I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I think there's much more growth that happens when you learn how to navigate conflict, and preferably before pregnancy. But that's a really tricky thing to test as your team, unless it happens naturally.
which is
So
why it's so important to go through every part of the kind of the guidebook. And anyone that we've spoken to in the past, and like I said, we haven't really. Um, it isn't. We've done reflection periods at points in time, because we kind of sit back and sit on the back veranda, and my husband and I sit there and go, "Can you believe this is our life?" Like, but like, you don't really think about the sort of the pathway that sort of took you here, and the kind of, and it it would serve me nothing to say that, like, it is hard work, like, and we had a dream team, like, and I can't stress that enough, and there is nothing that you can kind of do that would ever repay that kind of gesture, or that kind of, and you don't want to try and mimic it, because it's kind of, so you're stuck in a situation where you kind of, that's what family do for each other, and so all of a sudden we're a family now, and you know and then that also means that I've got Gemma's family, which is, they're They're a lot too. But we've just all come together, and I love them dearly. And like it's really a difficult thing to describe. So I don't know if I'm quite
Well,
articulating
I
it,
think
but I think it's
she's
yeah,
written in the chat they are a lot.
they are, and I love them all, but they are a lot.
They are. And I think there's so many valuable things here that if people are brand new and listening to this, initially people probably come into this going, I need to find a surrogate. But what you end up finding is her immediate and extended family if you kind of do it well. And so you've got to be prepared for that, and that can be challenging, but also beautiful and to grow your village. But it can take work and energy.
Absolutely. And like I said, I mean, and we're all the better for it. Like
And so
like
is Rupert.
Gemma's mum, she would head up and look after the kid. Her Gemma's kids would fly Gemma down here to do scans and things. She's also part of the team. So anyway, it's but so so getting back to your PowerPoint presentation, it's a lot, but it's so important that you kind of do it. It feels overwhelming looking at it in a 40 slide decks.
So
If
true.
you take it one day at a time and you sort of work through
Mhm.
that, but
Yes,
yeah,
a lot of steps. That's probably a good time to answer one of the questions. Alfie typed in that in the event that the surrogate wishes to offer to help, would this happen before or after the counselling sessions? I think what is implying there is before. It's often then when the surrogate says, yes, let's go, that then starts the counselling and legals. Would you agree with that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like we started counseling by ourselves. We were actually recommended. I actually can't remember who told us, but they sort of said if you start a counseling session with a counselor that gets to know you, then they can sort of help you personally throughout the journey. Because if you can give them the chance, so if a counselor can get a chance to get to know you before you go through this process, then they can sort of help. And again, that was extremely helpful for me. Confronting but helpful. In Queensland, we even have we had to do a psychiatric assessment, which says that we are of sound mind and um, we understand the nature in which we're of the relationship we're entering, and we're of sound mind. And I often talk about the fact that that was a very confronting exercise to do because you learn a bit about yourself. I was more sound. You were more sound, yes, yes, yeah. But I have a certificate that says that I'm of sound mind. So do you?
Good point. Maybe South Australia, we don't have that. Maybe I should come and get a Queensland one if I'd pass.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so many things that you learn here. So then one of the other photos that we've got here, I reckon is probably embryo transfer, or it's one of the scans getting ready for that with the famous Dr. Keong that Jemma has done many egg donations with. Obviously, lots has happened in the journey to get to this point. Anything you'd like to mention then about the lead up to this point?
Look, we created our embryos with a different fertility clinic, and then transferred them through to Monash, which was well, it was an exercise, but it was an excellent outcome because there was Monash were fantastic. Not that it's not a plug, but they handled it extremely well. Gemma had a previous relationship with Key Ong, who is fairly well known within the community, I think. And honestly, he's a terrific guy. So it was an easy. I mean, sorry, it wasn't an easy process to transfer, but it was the right step for us to was to transfer the embryos to that stage. So yeah, I mean that was the day we had our Macca's fries and
Well, I've got that photo here.
there you go. Yeah. That was apparently that's the tradition, and we were not messing with the tradition.
And
Um,
and did it work first go?
it did. It did.
Yes.
It did. It
And
did.
so you still got some embryos left in the freezer then?
We do. We do.
Yeah. We'll come
We
back
do.
to
Yeah.
So then the pregnancy begins, and so obviously via a distance. But so then I think one of these first photos on the left there is the finding out that you're pregnant. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. Gemma had teed up. I'm not going to look at that photo. That's going to set me off. No, like, yeah, Jemma had sort of invited us up, and we were obviously going to. So we went up to Gladstone, and we had our little the pea on a stick kind of reveal,
Yes.
and it was four sticks. Sorry, pea on four sticks. And
Just to
that
make
was
sure.
yeah, and obviously Jemma being Jemma, and Gemma's extremely thoughtful. She had created shirts and little, bits and pieces, which she hadn't found out either. So we found out together, and fortunately, it was a positive result because she'd made shirts.
Scrum. And so that's a rugby reference, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Zoe also said that counselling helped us learn a bit more about each other. Zoe is my female equivalent. My sister Zoe is my female equivalent, and I'm extremely, extremely lucky to have her as a sister. And she's the same version of me. So we going through counselling, we learned a bit about each other
Mm.
and
Yeah.
ourselves. So yeah,
Yes, this surrogacy thing, you don't just come in and get a baby at the end, do you? It's an enormous process.
I'm
Yes.
definitely not the same person before.
No, indeed. And now, so then the pregnancy went on, and what's your memory of that pregnancy for Gemma in terms of her health, but also in terms of sorry, how much contact you had during the pregnancy and able to help out at all?
Oh, look, we had daily contacts. I think we daily messages. I think, like I said, we've returned to kind of normal kind of levels of communication these days, but which is regular. But we had daily conversations, which about like messages, about everything. And I think there was also some pregnancy stuff scattered in there, but we just chatted a lot. So yeah, look, in terms of along the journey, we had very open lines of communication, which I think helped us a lot because, like I said, it's not native for myself and my husband either. So it was an important part in making sure we were on the same page, particularly being distant. Where Jemma was in Gladstone, there was, Gladstone's a slightly smaller, well, slightly smaller. So it's a smaller community, doesn't necessarily have the same sort of medical facilities. So we obviously came to Brisbane for most of the medical-based stuff, but we had anticipated going to Rockhampton for the birth. Marta they had us in the newsletter. They were really prepared for us. They were making kind of a big deal of Rocky Marta, but Rupert had other plans. So after we had an initial bleeding scare a couple of weeks in, which really kind of rocked us a lot, and then it rocked us a lot, obviously, or us as a team. And Rupert came 2 months early, so at 30 weeks, Gemma's water broke, and she was airlifted to the Sunshine Coast University Hospital, where we spent 2 weeks in as inpatients and outpatients close by, which was quite the bonding experience. Let me tell you, we honestly, if you pinpoint a point in your life, that was quite a period of heavy emotions, but we just rallied together. It was something else. At
And
30.
I was just going to say, so that's unexpected. You had been planning for the travel up there around the birth time, and therefore Gemma and her family had been preparing for that too. And so this was completely unexpected. So she had a family that needed to be looked after, and
Yep.
she's then down there for the safety of the baby and for herself too, to try and keep him cooking for a couple more weeks. So yeah, any comments on that period of time navigating all of that?
Look, best laid plans. We had like I said in Rocky, we had a birth photographer, we had a doula lined up, we had it all. We had tried to cover all bases and make sure that we were doing all the stuff. And then obviously Rupert had a different plan. And I think, look, that was probably the most challenging part was that period, obviously, because it was so intense and we just didn't know what was happening. And I think, there's as a heterosexual normal, sorry, probably shouldn't use the term normal, but a natural kind of couple birth, you kind of go through that with your partner. And we had everyone. So, like my husband and I were kind of, um, we obviously as a couple came out of it just, but as a group, I think that I think we all kind of commented you could understand how groups don't survive this kind of thing, and I think we we're so lucky that we had, and like I said, I don't want to, I don't want to labor onto it, but we were so lucky that we had put in the work. And the work, it wasn't work. We loved hanging out. We have love hanging out with each other, but like we put in the work up front, and we spent the time together, so we got to know each other. So that argument that we had early in the piece about my delivery of whatever, it all sort of stemmed up to this event, which sort of kept us in a state of flux. That we all banded together really well. So I think despite the the ritual and how over sort of whelming that pack, again, we'll go back to the pack because the pack looks terrifying. Um, there's a lot, but it's important, and I know of some people who haven't gone through all of that stuff, and maybe haven't fared as well as what we have. And we like I said, we're extremely grateful that we did, but we can understand why it would have why it doesn't work out sometimes.
Mm. Well, definitely a credit to your team navigating that that premature birth, and then he's been okay on the whole. So then life starts to move on, doesn't it? And then he eventually gets discharged from hospital.
The reward for all of that period is that you now have this infant that you have to keep alive, which is also terrifying. The
Yes.
reward is you have a newborn
Ooh,
and no one is coming to save you.
no rule book with that.
No, no. But again, like you said, well, even afterwards, we sort of still it's still a pretty magical thing to sort of hang out. We went up to Australia Zoo the other day together. Like like stuff. We just it's easy, and we kind of, I guess, if you kind of go through that sort of stuff, it's impossible that you aren't going to be as close as what we are.
Mm. Unless it falls apart, but that's a credit to
Unless it falls apart. Yeah.
yes.
Which, yeah.
Yeah, I might come back and ask you about that, but we'll just finish off these photos. So then some photos that you shared with me on, in the lead up to this about little Rupert, but then what's the photo of everybody going on there? What does that photo say or mean to you?
This is the one of the first opportunities we kind of had after the birth for everyone to get back together, because like I said, we sort of I mean the way in which it sort of fell out, we transferred from Sunshine Coast to the Gold Coast, sorry, Sunshine Coast to Greenslopes private, and private, so in Greenslopes, uh we didn't know how long we were going to be in there for, so we actually, like, Gemma's family, extended family, actually went home, and she set up shop in Greenslopes for what could have been 2 months,
Mm.
because they were kind of, if, as long as he's happy to stay in there, we're happy to keep him in there. But circumstantially, she needs to be um, in the hospital. So everyone kind of went home, and then the very next morning, he came along. So logistically, this was the first opportunity we kind of had once he was out of hospital to sort of get back together as a extended sort of team family,
Mm.
and in our backyard.
So that's in your yard where Gemma's husband and their kids from their together and their blended family are all there with you guys at your place. That's a pretty special photo.
Very special.
Yeah. And then the weekend just gone, or very recently, this is you guys camping.
It is the surprise edition, Santa. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is us when we went camping at Goombro, and Rupert's obviously nearly 2 now, so he's up and at 'em and into everything, and he's yeah. I mean, dad life is the best thing that's ever happened to us. So
Right. And I think these photos are great to show people who are at the beginning going, this will hopefully be everybody one day, that living dad life, mum and dad life. And that'll keep you busy.
yep, it's hard, but honestly, there's there's nothing like it.
Yeah. And that's what we were here for, right?
Yep, yep.
I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping and say if anybody needs to leave the webinar, you're welcome to, but we'll just carry on for a little bit longer and ask a few more questions there. Right back at the beginning, you said, surrogacy had some highs and some lows, some challenging times. Are there any other ones that spring to mind that are worth drawing on, or some challenging times as a team, or anything that you do differently?
Anything we do differently? I don't. Nah.
Embryo testing.
Oh, the embryo testing. Sorry, yes, embryo testing. There was a miscommunication with our initial fertility specialist, that there was some extra tests we could test for, and we got them all. And he said, oh, we could do these extra ones that would actually tell us that would probably give us an indication of the gender. It would also test for all these extra things. And I said, why wouldn't we? And our fertility specialist heard, why would we? Because we were such low risk for these certain things.
Yeah.
So I think, look, I mean, one miscommunication sort of haunted us for almost the entire pregnancy, because it's a gap. And, I can't stress that if there was a gap to be filled in our pathway, if there was a medical specialty we went down to the Gold Coast to a very specific test that did, a lot more of a range of tests than the other ones. But because of a miscommunication, we missed out on one that we probably really would have liked to have had. So, I mean, you can be as diligent as you like. Things don't go to plan. So, particular highs or lows, I mean, every day there was highs, there was lows, it's hard. It's hard getting to know someone. It's like you become fast friends, but you're so invested. It's hard to sort of know, because typically if you know someone, a close friend of yours, you kind of anticipate their needs. You know what they're like. You know the coffee order. You know that it's we know Gemma's coffee order, but like
you had to learn it.
Yeah, you have to learn these things, and
it's a fascinating.
Sorry.
Oh, I find it a fascinating thing. It's a very intimate thing that you're doing, because you usually only have a child with your life partner. Who you usually
I was going to get JimBob to come on board. Sorry.
Yes, we're going to have
He's
a
just
guest.
put Rupert down. There you go.
We're having a guest appearance here from the other half. JimBob, hello. Would you like to add something?
I put Rupert down in record time. I'd like that on camera too.
We've got that on record, everybody. Cheers. Good work, Dad.
I just wanted to say, like, a massive high for me that I had no idea was coming was this kind of moment watching Jemma and Will's kids play with our kid Rupert, and like the parents, Jemma and Will and us, kind of sitting back, and that bonding was like, they were going to be mates. We knew they were going to be mates, but watching Rupert react to them, and like when we went to Australia Zoo recently, that's kind of what I was really excited for. Was like, oh, what's Cooper going to think? What's Evie going to think? What are they going to do with him? Like, how is he going to? Like, where is he up to? Is he going to kind of be able to say their names because he's learning to say names and stuff at the moment? It's where parents together now, and the relationship kind of takes on a different meaning.
It's evolved again.
Yeah. It's this high for me, and like there are many highs, but like almost afterwards, you kind of go, I'm just going to be a parent now. That's just what's going to happen. Jemma and us are going to be friends and family forever. But you don't realize, actually, our kids are going to be something special too. Like, they talk about cousin Rupert and stuff. So like, they're going to have this bond. And like, I know James, I've been listening from the other room, and I know James has mentioned like how integrated our families are, but like it doesn't stop with the adults. It's a lot more than that. It's the grandparents as well, but it's down to the kids. And I don't know how much further it goes, but it was very exciting for that realization for me that like, yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see. And it's like, yeah, I get real excited about how excited Evie is to see him every time. So yeah.
Can I just say, on behalf of all surrogates, this is the dream. Hearing the parents, the IPs, valuing the surrogate's children. So it's one thing if the team falls apart and they break the surrogate's heart, but if you break the hearts of the children of the surrogates, that's extra painful. And so for you to value that relationship and not just see it as, oh, we have to keep in touch with the surrogate and her kids, but you're actually excited to see the surrogate's kids and allowing that extra village, those extra connections that your child gets to have. And therefore you've got care and love for Gemma's children as well. But that doesn't necessarily just happen naturally. That's a credit to your team that you continue to value that. And I think that's the dream. I think that's what, for surrogates in Australia who do it altruistically, this is what we hope to have come out of it. And even with distance like you guys have, you see each other from time to time in holidays when you can, and you're valuing it. So well done to your team. You are a credit to how surrogacy can be done here in Australia.
This time is a godsend.
What did you say? This time? Did you...
FaceTime.
Oh, FaceTime.
Phone.
Yes.
It's Rupert sees like a lot of Jerry and Will's kids. He's mostly looking at himself, but I know they love seeing him on the phone.
Yes. And what language might Rupert be using to describe Jemma? Is she like an auntie or a tummy mummy or?
Tummy auntie is what we've kind of said.
Tummy auntie. I like that.
And Zoe's eggy auntie.
Eggy auntie. Awesome. And over time, as he learns that, but it's again fantastic that you're not waiting till he's a certain age to start telling him the story. It's just been part of the language that you use.
We're probably integrating it a bit too early. He doesn't have a clue, but it's just getting in practice.
The psychologists that I've had on and the research is showing, no, that the more the language is just a part of it, then easier it's going to be for him and you. And it's just normalizing it. So yeah, it's a wonderful way to have a family. What is it they saying? What, you don't have a tummy auntie? That's right. I think my kids sometimes refer to Baker as a tummy cousin type of thing. But yeah, even though we live locally, it doesn't necessarily mean it's done, you know, quite in that way. And that hopefully that's how every team sees it. But of course, every team will find the balance for what suits them and how it all works there. But yeah, well done, guys. And so, James, we did mention before that there are some embryos in the freezer, and that we were talking before the webinar started about the enormity of how to do surrogacy well in Australia and that time commitment of building it up with a new person. Have you considered a sibling project in Australia or not? And what might that look like?
Yes.
Okay,
how hard? No. Obviously, yes. But like, you know, we've sort of talked about, like, and as we've articulated, we've had such an experience and such an incredible team arrangement. How do you replicate that? And look, and you can't replicate that. So we're a bit lost, to be honest. We have, you know, like I have my sister Zoe, and I actually have a brother Brad, but he hasn't given me his embryo, so I don't really care.
No,
but
not going to carry a baby for him.
But I mean, Zoe will continue to be one of the best parts of my life because she's my sibling as well. So and as you sort of previously, we would have probably, and I'm only talking for myself, so I can probably be as honest as you like. I thought that a sibling journey was kind of greedy. I think looking into the community and kind of seeing people go, look, we'd love to do a sibling journey, and there's people out there who are desperate to get what we have, and we are so bloody lucky. You know, if we never have, if we never have another baby, then you know, we've obviously been as, you know, as fortunate as we possibly can be. But you know, now we're parents and we've got Rupert, and like, I'd love for him to have a relationship like I have with my sister with a sibling, and so you kind of owe it to Rupert to try and explore what that looks like. But then, you know, reflecting on how grateful we are and how lucky we've been to date, and trying to overlay the process and the kind of the all the hoops and things, which they are enormous. They're enormous undertaking, and is an enormous undertaking to do. And now we've got to do that with a 2-year-old, like, or like without detracting his quality of life. We kind of have to sort of start this project. And again,
So you
how do you sort of, how do you approach something to sort of create a relationship that is not the same as Jemma, Will, and our team? Like it's you can't possibly have the same relationship.
no, you can't, control copy. And so,
You wouldn't want to, yeah.
no, that's right. It would have to be its new own thing, but
Yeah.
therefore we can understand why there are options, that overseas options in some ways could be an option.
Yeah, exactly. It does open those up, and previously that wasn't something that we really had a huge amount of sort of interest in doing, and now maybe that's kind of our avenue. Well, we find ourselves at the start of this kind of stairwell. You got to choose a path somewhere, and like it's a different path again. But maybe that's all we need. Who knows?
Indeed. Well, I feel like we'll check in with you in a couple of years' time and see what comes from this, eh?
Sure.
Who knows? People might be listening and might be like, oh, somebody in Australia might go, yeah, I already know you. This is great. I'll offer it. But you just never know, right?
Absolutely.
But it's huge time commitment too. And particularly, as you said, having basically a 2-year-old, doing travel is not as easy just to drop everything and get to Jemma if need be. And not Jemma, a different surrogate. So, yeah. Well, is there anything else then that is in your notes that we wanted to make sure we mentioned, or have we roughly covered it all?
I think, look, I probably haven't covered the self-discovery thing, but I think there's probably I would feel remiss to say to people you won't change yourself through this process. I mean, it's a life-changing process. An example I kind of had, like, I'm biologically, it's my sister's egg and my husband's sperm, and leading into this, I absolutely had. And like I can only identify it now because it's well past it, and I could only laugh. But the amount of energy that went into something like me feeling like I may not connect with him because he's not biologically mine now feels absurd. But at the time, I can tell you it was not something that was, it kind of crippled me at points, going like he's doing, I'm doing all this stuff, but he's not going to be mine, and that couldn't be further from it. So like I use that as an example, but I think you have to go into it knowing that you're going to come out of kind of a different person, and a better person. I hope. I hope better person, but definitely different.
Definitely different. JimBob's not sure there, and I think you're right, because sometimes the intended mums are faced with the reality that they might need an egg donor as well as a surrogate. So they're also faced with that same genetic challenge, or even sometimes in the 2 guy situations, they don't have a sister. So there is no genetic connection in some way at all to the second dad. And one of my 2 dads were in the same boat. The one that wanted to be the genetic father, it then were not producing the strongest embryos. And so then he had to make that decision, and genetics don't make a parent. And you guys know whose dad, Rupert knows who his dads are, and that's all that it is. You've been there since the beginning and caring for him and raising him, and that's parenting. But it's also okay to not be okay at the beginning there, and some people might not be able to move past it, and that's okay too. But it's also okay to seek some counselling and to talk about these things and to do that growth. Did you get okay with it before Rupert was born then, or it wasn't until he was born and that it changed for you?
Probably couldn't tell you.
Yeah, okay. Well, then that says to me, that probably says to me it wasn't definitely okay during the journey. It like,
oh no, the whole time during the journey I had a little gremlin on my shoulder about it. I cannot understate how
that
I was
way.
hung up on that. Yeah. And like I said, and now I laugh at how much energy went into it, but at the time it was very real.
Yes. And I think that's fantastic to verbalize these things, because you're making that real for other people listening and going, I feel the same, and normalizing that. So thank you for sharing that. That's really valuable.
I will just say a little funny story. So Zoe and I biologically contributed. Zoe's partner, Pontus, is Rupert's absolute favorite person in the world. And James is the flavor at the moment. So Zoe and I kind of sit back going, what's wrong with us? And like Rupert's off having his best life with James and Pontus, and we're going, well, no idea. Nothing matters.
No. Yeah. My seed and my egg. Where are you off to, buddy? So it'll be come round in circles, different flavors of the month, as you say. So
we've already had it. Yep. The cycle.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. Well, I think we're done, unless anything else springs to mind.
No, I think I've covered I've covered my list, that's for sure.
Wonderful. Well, again, you guys are a credit to Surrogacy Done Well in Australia. You've built up a beautiful team there together, and that seems to be ongoing, and that seems to be the plan for the future. Modern families made in different ways there, and expanding the village so that Rupert grows up with a bigger village, because it's okay to have more people loving on your kid, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, I'll sum it up there and say thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope you found it useful. In the next webinar in a fortnight, I'll be joined by a surrogate as co-host, Michelle Fenwick. I really do encourage IPs to attend a surrogate one, because if in the future you have a surrogate offer, she's going to, well, think about maybe offering. She's going to have a lot of questions. And so if you've attended a surrogate webinar, you'll be able to anticipate some of those questions that she might bring at you. But if you've still got lots of unanswered questions or would like them answered privately, consider joining SASS so that you can be connected with a mentor to have them answered in a one-on-one setting. I like to say, let's change the world one conversation at a time, so that we can educate more people about how surrogacy works in Australia. It can be very lonely and overwhelming in the beginning and all along the way as well, but there is plenty of support in the village if you go looking for it. And as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and in the case of surrogacy, it takes a village to make a child. So welcome to the village, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, James and JimBob. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
A pleasure. Lovely to have you on. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'll end the webinar. Good night, everyone.